My elderly parents scammed me for 100K and disappeared. When I tried to find them to sue them, my wife asked me not to do so. Later, I found that this scam went deeper than I had thought. I, 44M, have been married for 15 years and recently found myself in a devastating family situation. I own a chain of cafes that I run with some business partners. We've done fairly well over the years, starting from a single location and expanding to 5 cafes across the city. It wasn't an easy journey, but with hard work and some luck, we managed to build a successful business. My parents, 64M and 63F, approached me a few months ago, saying they needed money to save their property. They explained they had a considerable amount of debt because of the expenses related to my upbringing and some poor financial decisions they made over the years. Growing up, we weren't wealthy by any means. My parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. Dad was a factory worker who often took on overtime shifts, while Mom juggled between a part-time teaching job and running a small tailoring business from home. They sacrificed a lot to give me a good education and opportunities they never had. I remember the day they scraped together enough money to buy me my first computer when I was in high school. It was secondhand and outdated, but to me, it was everything. That computer sparked my interest in business management software, which eventually led me to study business in college. According to my parents, most of the loan was from my mom's elder brother, Uncle Jim, who had passed away last year. Uncle Jim was always the successful one in the family. He owned a construction company and lived in a big house in the suburbs. He was also the one who loaned my parents money for my college tuition when their savings fell short. Everything Uncle Jim owned went to his elder son, my cousin Derek, who's always been a bit of a bully. Derek and I never got along as kids. He was 3 years older and always made sure I knew he was better off than me. As adults, we barely spoke, only seeing each other at mandatory family gatherings. My parents said Derek wanted the total money back, or he'd file a lawsuit against them. They claimed they had given most of it back already and now needed only 100K to be debt-free. The story seemed plausible given Derek's character and my family's financial history. When I suggested talking to Derek directly, my parents insisted he wasn't ready to communicate. They seemed desperate, almost panicky. Mom's hands shook as she explained the situation, and Dad looked more worn out than I'd ever seen him. It was hard to see them like this, especially knowing how much they'd sacrificed for me over the years. After much deliberation, I decided to help. I gave them the 100K they asked for, but we kept the transaction off the books. It was a significant amount for me. It had taken almost 16 years to save that money. This was money I had set aside for my kids' college fund and as a safety net for my family's future. I handed over the money, feeling a mix of concern and relief. I thought I was doing the right thing, helping the people who had given up so much for me. Little did I know, this decision would turn my life upside down. A week after I gave them the money, my parents sold their house. I was surprised, but thought maybe they were downsizing to manage their finances better. But then, they vanished. Their phones were disconnected, emails bounced back, and none of our relatives knew where they were. I was absolutely devastated. I couldn't believe they would do this to me after everything we'd been through as a family. The betrayal cut deep, making me question every memory, every sacrifice I thought they'd made for me. I kept thinking about all the times they'd supported me, trying to reconcile those memories with their recent actions. How could the same people who worked extra shifts to buy me that second-hand computer turn around and scam me? The situation has caused a significant rift between my wife and me. When I first told her what happened, she was shocked and sympathetic. She held me as I broke down, assuring me we'd figure it out together. But as days passed and I started talking about suing my parents to recover the money, she became increasingly resistant to the idea. "They're your parents," she kept saying. "You can't sue your own family." But I felt I had no choice. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the breach of trust, the lies, and the complete disregard for our relationship. My wife and I have been arguing about this constantly. She thinks I'm overreacting and that there must be some explanation. But I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Why would my parents, who always preached about honesty and integrity, suddenly act this way? I've tried reaching out to other family members, but no one seems to know where my parents are. My aunts and uncles are just as shocked as I am. Some of them have sided with me, while others think I should let it go for the sake of family peace. The whole situation has me questioning everything. I've always prided myself on being a good judge of character, but now I'm not so sure. If my own parents could deceive me like this, Who can I trust? I've been losing sleep over this, replaying every conversation in my head, trying to find clues I might have missed. Did they give any hints about their plans? Were there warning signs I ignored? The cafe business has been suffering because of my distraction. My business partners have been patient, but I know they're concerned. I've tried to focus on work, but it's hard when your personal life is in shambles. I remember the day we opened our first cafe. It was a tiny place, barely bigger than a food truck, but it was ours. My parents were there, beaming with pride. Dad even worked the register for the first week to help us out. Mom baked muffins every morning to supplement our limited menu. They believed in me when no one else did. Now, I find myself staring at the walls of our flagship store, wondering if those memories are even real. Did they support me because they loved me, or were they investing in a future payday? I've considered hiring a private investigator to find my parents, but part of me is afraid of what I might discover. What if they're in trouble? What if they were forced into this somehow? Or worse, what if they really did just take the money and run? The 100K was meant to be a safety net for my family's future. My wife and I had talked about using it for our kids' college funds or as a down payment on a vacation home. Now those dreams seem out of reach. I'm torn between my anger at being betrayed and my worry for my parents' well-being. Despite everything, I can't help but hope there's a reasonable explanation for all of this. I'm not sure what to do next. Should I go ahead with the lawsuit? Try to find them myself? Or should I listen to my wife and let it go? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and things have taken an even more shocking turn. After much internal debate and several heated arguments with my wife, I decided to go ahead with the lawsuit against my parents. This decision led to a major blowout with my wife. She was vehemently against it, saying I was tearing the family apart. Her reaction seemed extreme, even considering her previous objections. One night, after a particularly heated argument where she accused me of being heartless and selfish, I noticed my wife acting suspiciously with her phone. She kept taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, which was unusual for her. My gut told me something was off, so I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her phone while she was sleeping. What I found left me speechless. There were dozens of messages between her and my parents. It turns out they had been in constant contact this whole time. As I read through the messages, my world crumbled around me. It became clear that my parents did have the money to pay off their debt, but they didn't want to do that. Instead, they had planned with my wife to scam me out of the 100K. The messages revealed that my wife was getting a share of the money. They had concocted an elaborate story about the debt and the threatening cousin, knowing I would want to help my parents. My wife's role was to convince me to give them the money and then discourage me from pursuing legal action when they disappeared. I was blindsided. Not only had my parents betrayed me, but my wife of 15 years was also involved. The person I trusted most, who I thought would always have my back, had been lying to my face for weeks. As I scrolled through their conversations, I found messages dating back months before my parents asked for the money. They had been planning this for a long time. There were discussions about how to approach me, what story would be most convincing, and how to handle the aftermath. I felt physically ill as I read my wife coaching my parents on how to act desperate and worried. She knew all my weak spots, all the buttons to push to make me want to help. She used her knowledge of our financial situation to determine exactly how much they could ask for without raising suspicion. The betrayal cut deep. I thought back to all the nights I'd spent tossing and turning, worried about my parents, while my wife comforted me. All those times she'd told me to let it go, to forgive them. It was all part of their plan. I confronted my wife the next morning. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I showed her the messages, she broke down. She confessed to everything, saying she did it because we needed the money. Apparently, she had gotten us into some debt with online shopping and gambling, which she had been hiding from me. She sobbed as she explained how it started as a small thing, a few online purchases here, a bit of online poker there, but it snowballed, and before she knew it, she was in deep. When my parents approached her with their plan, she saw it as a way out of the hole she'd dug for us. I was too angry and hurt to even process her excuses. The woman I'd shared my life with for 15 years, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I asked her to leave the house immediately. She's currently staying with her sister, and I've told her not to contact me except through my lawyer. I've expanded the lawsuit to include my wife now. I know this might seem extreme to some, but I can't let this level of betrayal go unpunished. The trust in both my marriage and my relationship with my parents has been irreparably broken. The hardest part has been explaining the situation to our kids. They're 13 and 11, old enough to understand that something serious is happening, but young enough to be confused and hurt by it all. I've tried to be honest with them without vilifying their mother or grandparents, but it's a delicate balance. My daughter, always perceptive, asked me if this meant we wouldn't be going on the family vacation. We'd been planning. My son, usually so stoic, broke down crying when he realized his mom wouldn't be living with us anymore. Their pain only adds to my anger at the situation. My business partners have been incredibly supportive through all of this. They've stepped up to handle more of the day-to-day operations, giving me time to deal with the legal and personal fallout. I'm grateful for their understanding, but I know I need to get back to work soon for my own sanity. I've started seeing a therapist to help me process everything. It's been helpful to have someone objective to talk to, someone who can help me navigate the storm of emotions I'm feeling. Some days, I'm consumed by anger. Other days, the sadness is overwhelming. And then there are days when I feel nothing at all, which is almost worse. The lawsuit is moving forward, but it's a slow process. My lawyer is optimistic about our chances of recovering the money, but warns it could take a while. In the meantime, I'm focusing on healing and rebuilding my life without the people I thought I could trust most. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. The lawsuit against my parents and soon-to-be ex-wife is progressing, but it's been a challenging and emotional journey. My lawyer suggested hiring a professional to locate my parents, as they were still off the grid. After some searching, we finally found them. They were living in a small coastal town, hundreds of miles away from our home. They had bought a modest house with some of the money they took from me. When confronted, my parents initially tried to maintain their story about the debt, but faced with the evidence we had gathered, including the messages with my wife, they finally admitted to the scam. Their confession was both a relief and a new source of pain. They expressed remorse, claiming they never meant to hurt me, but I found it hard to believe or accept their apology. My mother broke down crying, telling me how they had always struggled financially and saw this as their only chance at a comfortable retirement. She spoke about the years of financial stress, the constant worry about making ends meet. She talked about watching their friends retire comfortably while they still lived paycheck to paycheck. In her mind, this wasn't just about the money. It was about finally having peace of mind in their golden years. My father, on the other hand, remained stoic and unapologetic. He argued that after all they had done for me, they deserved the money. He brought up every sacrifice they'd made, the extra jobs, the missed vacations, the hand-me-down clothes they wore so I could have new ones. In his eyes, this was simply balancing the scales. His attitude only fueled my determination to see the lawsuit through. I reminded him of all the times I'd helped them over the years, paying off their car, helping with medical bills, even offering to help them relocate to a cheaper area when they complained about the cost of living. I had always been there for them, and this is how they repaid me. The revelation of my parents' location and their confession has added new complexity to the legal proceedings. My lawyer is confident that we have a strong case, but warns that family court cases can be unpredictable and emotionally draining. On the personal front, I've been struggling to cope with the aftermath of these betrayals. My kids are having a hard time understanding why they can't see their grandparents or their mother. I've arranged for them to start therapy to help them process everything that's happening. My daughter, always close to her grandparents, keeps asking when she can visit them. She doesn't understand why the people who used to babysit her and take her to the park are suddenly off limits. My son, on the other hand, has become withdrawn. His grades are slipping, and he's lost interest in his usual hobbies. My soon-to-be ex-wife has been trying to reconcile, sending messages through her lawyer about how sorry she is and how she wants to make things right. But I'm not ready to forgive or trust her again. The divorce proceedings are moving forward, and we're negotiating custody arrangements for our children. Work has been my main source of stability during this tumultuous time. I've thrown myself into expanding the cafe chain, using it as a distraction from my personal problems. We're looking at opening 2 new locations in the coming months, which has been a welcome positive focus. I've also been leaning heavily on my friends for support. They've been amazing, offering everything from a listening ear to help with the kids. My best friend Mike has been particularly supportive. He's been coming over regularly, helping with household chores, and keeping me company on the weekends when the kids are with their mother. As difficult as this whole experience has been, it's also been a wake-up call. I'm learning to set better boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to value myself more. It's a painful lesson, but I'm determined to come out of this stronger and wiser. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm finally starting to see some resolution to this painful saga. The lawsuit against my parents and ex-wife has concluded, and I wanted to share the outcome with you all. After months of legal battles, numerous court appearances, and mountains of paperwork, the court ruled in my favor. My parents and ex-wife have been ordered to repay the full $100,000, plus interest and legal fees. The judge was particularly harsh in his criticism of their actions, calling it a deplorable breach of family trust. The day of the final hearing was intense. I sat in the courtroom, my stomach in knots, as the judge delivered his verdict. My parents sat on one side, looking older and more worn than I'd ever seen them. My ex-wife was on the other side, her eyes red from crying. Despite everything, a part of me still ached seeing them like this. My parents, faced with the court order, have agreed to sell their coastal home to repay me. They're moving back to our hometown, where they'll be staying with my aunt until they can get back on their feet. The house sold quickly, given the desirable location, but for less than they'd hoped. They'll have just enough left over for a small apartment rental. Dad called me after the sale, his voice gruff with emotion. He said they were sorry, that they never meant for things to go this far. Mom got on the phone too, sobbing as she apologized. They asked if there was any way we could reconcile, any way to rebuild our relationship. I told them I needed time. My ex-wife, unable to pay her share immediately, has agreed to a payment plan. She's taken a second job to meet the payments. Our divorce has been finalized, and we've settled on a co-parenting arrangement for our kids. It's still tense between us, but we're trying to keep things civil for the children's sake. The first time I had to drop the kids off at her new apartment was awkward. She's living in a small 2-bedroom place now, a far cry from our family home. The kids were excited to see her, which was both heartwarming and painful to watch. As I left, I caught her looking at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. For a moment, I was reminded of the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. But the memory of her betrayal quickly overshadowed any lingering feelings. Speaking of the kids, they're slowly adjusting to our new reality. The therapy has been helping, and they're starting to understand that sometimes good people can make bad choices. It's been a tough lesson for all of us. My daughter still asks about her grandparents occasionally, but less frequently now. My son's grades have started to improve, and he's showing interest in his hobbies again. The cafe business has been a silver lining throughout this ordeal. The 2 new locations we opened are doing well, and we're even considering expanding to a neighboring state. My partners have been incredibly supportive, and this experience has only strengthened our business relationship. Focusing on work has been a welcome distraction from my personal troubles. On a personal level, I'm still working through my trust issues in therapy. It's a slow process, but I'm making progress. I've started dating again, taking it slow, and being upfront about my recent experiences. It's been nice to remember that there are still honest, trustworthy people out there. I met Sarah at a local business owners meetup. She runs a small bookstore and has been through a difficult divorce herself. We've been on a few dates, and while I'm not ready for anything serious, it's nice to have someone who understands what I'm going through. I've also been working on rebuilding some family relationships. My aunts, uncles, and cousins have been understanding and supportive throughout this whole ordeal. We've been having regular family dinners, minus my parents, of course. It's helped remind me that family is about more than just blood relations. Last week, my cousin Derek, the one my parents claimed was threatening to sue them, reached out to me. He had heard about what happened from other family members and wanted to clear the air. We met for coffee, and he explained that he had never asked my parents for money. In fact, he said Uncle Jim had forgiven most of the debt before he passed away. This conversation brought some closure, but also opened up new questions about my parents' motivations. As for my parents, I'm still not ready to have them back in my life. They've sent letters of apology, but I'm not sure I'll ever be able to fully trust them again. For now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward with my life. The kids have asked about seeing their grandparents. I'm considering allowing supervised visits in the future, but I'm not there yet. My therapist has advised taking it slow and prioritizing my children's well-being in any decisions about family reunification. This whole experience has been a harsh lesson in the importance of financial independence and the dangers of blind trust, even in close family relationships. While I wouldn't wish this situation on anyone, I've grown from it. I'm more cautious now, but also more appreciative of the genuine relationships in my life. As I sit here in my office, overlooking the bustling cafe below, I can't help but reflect on how much has changed in the past year. The journey has been painful, but I'm starting to see a way forward. I'm focusing on being the best father I can be, growing my business, and slowly rebuilding my personal life. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and kind words have been a source of strength during some of my darkest moments. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Life goes on, and I'm determined to make the best of it.